Hey, so you remember a few videos ago when I reviewed every game from Nom Nom Nami? Well,
there is another.
While I was working on the big Nom Nom Nami video, the developer herself was bemoaning being unable to announce a new game that was basically finished and ready to go. It's just that her publisher was unwilling to allow her to announce it until June. This piqued my interest, and I was left tempted to delay the video until it came out, but it had already been drawing close to a month without a new release, so I opted to just forge on ahead anyway. In June, the announcement came of Return to Ash, a completely original game in partnership with Serenity Forge, who appears to almost exclusively publish definitive and HD versions of other Ren'Py and RPG Maker games. Pretty high-profile ones, too.
Ding dong, normal guy in the house!
Anyway, Return to Ash wasn't connected to any of Nami's other work, though in conception it's got elements of Astra's Garden and Syrup in the Ultimate Suite. Several of the characters' designs and characterizations are reminiscent of Vinegar and Syrup, and Nami herself said that it explores a lot of themes she's wanted to explore with Vinegar herself. Return to Ash is about Ashleigh Wintergrave, a woman who has been chronically ill her entire life and was hospitalized at 15 with some mysterious illness that left her tired, aching, and weak all the time. Ash's design and characterization all come together to have the very profound emotional effect of hearing Laura Jill Miller no matter how you read her dialogue.
The very thought of people watching me on screen in HD makes me... Oh, I envy turtles. They can curl their soft, vulnerable bodies into their hard shells where none of life's sharp edges can harm them. Do I look taller to you? Heights and being tossed around are two of my biggest anxieties.
Ash's life has been nothing but loneliness. Being sick all the time meant she didn't get a chance to make friends, and after being in the hospital for a while, she was slowly forgotten by everyone. Even her parents haven't visited her in over a year. One day, she wakes up to find the hospital unusually bright and quiet. The nurse is nowhere to be seen, and with the way to call them mysteriously absent. She leaves and finds another woman who explains that this is the afterlife. She has died. Basically, everyone here is in a form of purgatory, having died in some form or another, though everyone is pretty cagey on the details. Presumably, Ash died in her sleep in the hospital. The other woman, Scarlet, brings her down to introduce her to Death, who has been running trials to give people the chance to earn a second shot at life. Scarlet has been here for several months and seen several people come and go from purgatory, while the other, Celadon, has been here for years, trying and failing to pass Death's trials. Death themselves has been absolutely torturing Celadon with trials that he can't actually complete, and explains that everyone there has an hourglass detailing how much time they have left. They then explain that actually, this is the afterlife for people who died a social death. Everyone in the afterlife is here because their social lives has, in some form or another, completely evaporated. And I don't mean like fake evaporated like most of your friends are online, I mean completely dead in the water. From here, Ash can get to the bottom of what makes each character tick, and bond with each of them as each character's social death is extremely different. Not everyone did this to themselves, and in fact, all but one of them are largely victims of circumstance or ignorance. Let's start with Scarlet. Scarlet is a businesswoman who Ash meets almost immediately after leaving her room. She has a very crude and pushy personality and often talks past Ash and tends to treat her like a child. This is something of a difficult hurdle for Ash to overcome, as she's rather used to doctors and nurses talking past her. Hell, Scarlet won't even call her Ash and instead calls her Ashleigh. Like, girl, you can't even afford this poor soul the lone courtesy of not using a name that is a literal tragedy. I mean, it's bad enough her name is Ashleigh Wintergrave, one season away from a cannibal serial killer. Scarlet has a rather dim view of the other residents. Celadon she views in absolute contempt for still trying to pass Death's trials, and she doesn't trust a word Death says about anything, to the point of straight up refusing the trials completely and deciding to find a way out on her own. Scarlet as a character practices a sort of surface level empathy where she's really insistent on being nice to Ash without actually being nice to her. She doesn't really listen to what Ash wants or says, and it's even a struggle to get her to call her Ash at all. She's always bringing up how Ash is disabled when chewing out other characters, even to Ash's chagrin. You can get the idea early on that while Scarlet is, to a certain degree, a caring person, she's way more preoccupied with the nebulous idea of being a good person. She even tries to bond with Ash over being two women trapped in a man's world, and when she does that, it comes off a touch hollow. Like, it's always weird when people unironically use the phrase girl boss, and it's just as unnerving here as when online socialists were trying to use it as a point of capitalist critique. I'm right on the money there because Scarlet is overcompensating. Scarlet's story involves being something of a corporate climber. Because the corporate world is male-dominated, Scarlet avoided other women in favor of networking and trying to claw her way to the top. Unfortunately, this got her wrapped up in a scandal where one of the male executives ruined the lives of many, many women, which doesn't elaborate on what, but we all know it was sexual abuse. Unfortunately, Scarlet inadvertently shredded the evidence when she was told to shred some documents, and didn't check what they were, and was implicated in the whole ordeal and fired. Scarlet lost everything. Nobody would speak to her, nobody would hire her, she was made more of a villain than the men who did the harm in the first place. She's treated as a traitor to women, so to speak, and an easier target for people's vindictiveness than an untouchable executive. This led to Scarlet, in a bit of desperation, attempting suicide and showing up here in the afterlife. When discussing the event, Scarlet seems more preoccupied with the fact that she was implicated over an accident than that fact that all of those women were harmed in the first place. She keeps hanging on the fact that everyone sees her as the villain. You get the idea that part of what caused her to be so vilified in the first place is her fixation on how she wasn't responsible for it. Is that fair? Of course not. If the world was fair, Elon Musk would have been stillborn or dropped in a dumpster at birth, the US would be the 4th Canadian territory, and this pack of violent genocidal barbarians wouldn't exist. Scarlet focuses so much on how she was wronged, rather than the women who went through far worse and whose abusers managed to get away because of her actions. Actions she hadn't intended, but actions she took regardless. Couple this with how Scarlet treats Ash, often vouching for her but ignoring everything she says, and it becomes clear that Scarlet is more concerned with her vision of herself as a good person, often pointing out virtues that you or I would consider the bare minimum for a person, period. You probably met someone like this. Hell, I once dated someone like this. People who have invested so much ego and personal pride in being a good person that when they mess up, it's like a personal crisis for them. Everything falls apart as they start spiraling over the fact that their vision of themselves has been cracked to the point that even if you're the one they hurt, you end up consoling them anyway. A cynical person would look at that as emotional blackmail, but I found that it's a genuine point of cognitive dissonance, especially among a certain breed of otherwise polite Christians. It creates such a profound dread that they're too busy panicking to fix even small problems. As Scarlet and Ash work to find a way out of the afterlife, the fact that all their avenues don't work even when they find the elevator only wears on Scarlet more and more, especially after Death fucks with her by saying the elevator out only works if you're a good person. This ultimately causes her to break down so hard she changes her name to Rouge, declares herself the Angel of Death, and says her penance will be guiding souls out of this place. Eventually, Ash and Celadon figure out the trick to leaving is that there has to be someone you want to see on the other side. They bring this to Rouge, only for her to start lecturing Celadon about being a good person. Celadon, ironically, decides he wants to go home to apologize to his ex-wife, and it actually works. And despite her self-flagellation, the idea that Celadon is, in her view, a better person than her, objectively, breaks her even harder. Even in her supposed penance walk, she still needs to see herself as better than others, and can't bring herself to actually value anyone. Until Death leaves to walk into the void. Leaving the building and walking out into the endless white is effectively oblivion. Ash can do it early on, whereupon her IV runs dry and her soul crumbles into, well, ash. Here, Ash will actually go out to look for Death, and she finally tells Scarlet to call her Ash instead of Ashleigh. Moved by this, Scarlet decides to look for Death herself despite never getting along with them, but she can fly so she can find them more easily. She brings Death back, and she and Ash finally get into the elevator. Having been humbled not just by Celadon making out before she did, but Ash finally giving her the business, Scarlet is able to see the button to get out because she finally has someone she wants to see on the other side. Ash. Scarlet's character is interesting because while the exact circumstances of her social death can't be said to be her fault, the string of events that led her to that position are. She's someone who prioritized moving up the corporate ladder over making real connections. She used superficial virtue signaling to wallpaper over her lack of real empathy for others. And in the aftermath of her social death, she was ultimately more concerned with appearances than the harm her actions had caused. Even her isolation from others is less about being alone and more about how she's perceived. It's only through meeting Ash and getting the lecture of a lifetime that she starts to rethink how she views people. It helps that Ash is just utterly lovable and you can't help but want to cherish her. Leaving with Scarlet is probably the longest and most extensive route the game can take, and also the most difficult. Multiple times I ended up stuck in leaving Scarlet behind because I hadn't tripped whatever switch I needed to get Ash to turn away from the elevator. For the record, there's a limited number of chances to bond with characters, and you need a bond of 3 by the end to get the fork in the story that leads to the character's ending. Celadon is arguably the easiest ending to get, as it just involves spending a lot of time with Celadon himself, and there aren't really any weird forks to take. Celadon has been here the well, Death has been here the longest, but Celadon is a close runner-up. Death has put Celadon through trial after trial, almost all of them coming with some kind of sadistic choice. Where Scarlet doesn't trust the trials, Celadon seems to put more and more faith into them the more and more he fails. Despite the fact that it's glaringly obvious Death is fucking with him for giggles, he continues putting his all into them. This comes to a head at a particularly gruesome trial on the second day. Death slams one of the other characters into a drawer in the morgue and tells Celadon that he can let them out whenever he wants, but if he does it too soon, he fails the trial. The outcome of this is actually wildly different depending on who you've bonded with. If Ash is bonded with Death, then Scarlet gets thrown into the morgue, where Celadon leaves her there until she gives in to despair and her soul disperses into Ash. But in any other situation, it's Ash that gets shoved into the morgue. This is especially gruesome because Ash has a deep-seated fear of the morgue and of the drawers themselves, a place where a corpse is deposited and then forgotten. Ash has a particular dread of being dropped into one of these, having lived at the hospital in a sickly state for her entire adolescent and adult life. If Ash bonded with Celadon, he lets her out immediately, forsaking his trial for Ash's sake. But if she hasn't bonded with either Celadon or Death, she's left in there while Celadon hems and haws on whether or not he could just wait until Scarlet screams at him to let her out. It's an especially traumatic experience for Ash, who is left shaken and unwilling to trust Celadon or Death after this. It speaks to Celadon's single-minded focus on getting out of the afterlife, how willing he is to throw people away over it. You're left thinking, what the fuck is this guy's problem? Well, throughout his story, you start getting all the little tells that something's up with him, calling Ash part of his downline for helping him, the almost religious adherence to the sunk cost fallacy, the way he remains ignorant of how Death is fucking him over no matter how high the stakes get. Then you end up in a conversation where Celadon talks about how his life was great. He ran his own business, had a wife and kids, but then things went south. He went into debt and his wife left him. He tried to get out of debt by selling more products, but this only made his problem worse. Turns out, Celadon got wrapped into a multi-level marketing scheme that milked him for cash and turned him into a recruiter desperate to get out of the hole the scheme dug him into. Like with his trials, he got stuck in the sunk cost fallacy and refused to accept that he was taking part in a scam. He even tries pitching the product to Ash with this almost desperate look in his eyes. On some level, Celadon is fully aware that his devotion to this scam is what destroyed his life, as all his friends and family simply blocked his number and stopped talking to him because his desperation to get out of debt meant he couldn't go very long in a conversation without bringing up You Thrive. You literally see him do it to Ash in the afterlife. Why are you trying to sell her health supplements, Celadon? She's dead. And before that, she already had the best medicine that you shouldn't need money to buy. Ironically, Celadon's already had issues like this before. He's been to rehab after a stint of alcoholism, and while he remembers the place fondly, he seems to have not absorbed the lessons he was supposed to take from them. He just fell into another addiction. Celadon's story highlights how the sunk cost fallacy can completely ruin lives, and how so many scams are based on it. Doesn't matter if it's an MLM or seed money or some other scam, they're based on the fallacy of, well, I've invested this much, I should keep going. It's something you find in people all the time. More than once I've critiqued a show or a long-running game and had someone admit that they hate the thing I critiqued but keep following it because of all the time they've invested. It's just one of those things people catch into, much like FOMO, which is then immediately exploited. Ironically, Celadon only comes to realize this in Scarlet's route, as it's there where he realizes he wants to apologize to his ex and try to make amends with people. In Celadon's route himself, the discussion about health supplements and how Celadon gave up everything for a chance of personal gain gives Death an idea for his next trial that is extremely clever and also extremely evil. When Ash realizes her IV is running low, she and Celadon go looking for a refill. It turns out that Ash's hourglass is her IV bag, and without it, she'll run out of time. Death sends them looking for a medicine for Ash, and Scarlet comes back with a bottle of quinine. Quinine is an extremely potent poison taken from hemlock plants, an extremely common plant found everywhere. Death's trial is pretty simple. If Ash drinks the poison, Celadon can leave. You sick fuck, what were you, Jigsaw's kid? Both Celadon and Scarlet think this is horrific. Celadon even tells Ash it isn't worth it, but Ash goes through with it, saying that she's running out of time anyway. She even gives this line, "I've felt just fine the entire time I've been here. I haven't felt normal like that since I was a little kid. I don't know if it's because this place is special, or if it's because whatever's in my IV was helping me, but I think my time to feel good is over now. It's something that shouldn't have been possible to begin with. That's why I'm okay with this. Don't worry about me, alright?" Aww, BB. She steps outside with Death and drinks the poison, only for it to turn out to have been a bluff the entire time. Death is sadistic, but they're not a murderer. It was an extremely diluted form of quinine, barely as effective as those scam supplements Celadon used to sell. Having won their trial, both Ash and Celadon are given the secret to leaving and head into the elevator. On the way up, Celadon asks Ash where she's staying and promises to come visit. He talks about how he used to work in health insurance as the guy who had to find any way to deny insurance claims. He hated it, and frankly anyone would hate it. Health insurance is a uniquely American creation, a vicious, bloodthirsty middleman who feeds on everyone like a vampire, not only taking money from people and giving nothing back in return, but their existence drives up medical costs for everyone. Health insurance is the reason you get charged $150 for some Tylenol and a cold compress in American hospitals. If health insurance didn't exist, You wouldn't need it, because its existence is the only reason prices are so high as to warrant getting it in the first place. It can be hard for some Americans to come to grips with, but the rest of the developed world has universal healthcare. America is the only first world nation that doesn't. It's one of the big 3 contributing factors that makes America a fucking joke compared to Canada, Europe, and Asia. Even autocratic dictatorships have free hospitals. The first sign of a prosperous country is the sick being well cared for. Celadon shows signs of being very deeply affected by it, as he still struggles to let go of profiting at another's expense. I find Celadon has the better journey in Scarlet's route because he ends up wanting to do right by the people he most wronged, but leaving with him and resolving to come visit Ash and start anew is also just a fine journey for a character like him to have. If you do the other routes, it becomes easy to dislike Celadon. I find he's probably the easiest to dislike, but nobody in the afterlife is without their baggage. Now, Death. That's a juicy one. Death's route is probably the one with the most unique content, as interacting with others makes Death completely uninterested in Ash, and hanging around with Death makes the other two unwilling to trust her. Death's cheap Halloween costume is hiding a young adult underneath, someone who spent a lot of time playing video games and surfing a read-only internet to get ideas for trials. If Ash bonds with Death, they spare her the morgue trial, and instead put Scarlet inside. While Celadon is waiting to let her out, the two go up to Ash's room to discuss their lives. Death then tells Ash the story of Mauve, a boy who was horribly mistreated in life, unloved by his parents, and tormented by others around him. When he came to the afterlife and discovered how to revive, he decided he didn't want to since his life was so bad, so instead he stayed here, watching everyone else leave without him. Over the years, he ended up being abused by other souls in the afterlife, so he became a vengeful ghost who punished the other souls who had something to go back to. Oh gee, I wonder who Mauve is. It is a mystery. Oh geez, we're gonna need the Scooby Gang for this one. When they get back to the morgue and open the drawer to let Scarlet out, she's not there anymore. There's only black soot and ash where she used to be. Uh-oh. Everyone deciding to leave her in there meant she succumbed to despair and her soul rotted away. Well, Ashleigh, you're a murderer. Guess we gotta put you in hell with the other Ashleigh. For their part, Death is extremely shaken, rather anxiously gives the win to Celadon and tells him how to leave. Celadon is uneasy the entire time. Nobody really knows how to handle this. This trial got someone killed and everyone's just trying to avoid thinking about it. With Ash desperate for answers, Death gives up the ghost that originally the information on how to leave was supposed to be given freely. The afterlife for a social death is meant as a place of relaxation and recovery. Leaving through the front exit leads to oblivion for those who want to abandon society and commit to being isolated. In most cases, souls are supposed to recover before taking the elevator out. Death kept this information from everyone because when you take a bunch of social rejects and put them in a cozy place free of real-world consequences and the stress of their everyday lives, what ends up happening is they don't want to leave at all. So Death makes people miserable enough to want to get the hell out of the afterlife as fast as possible. That's their self-appointed role, at least. It's pretty obvious from the moment the mask came off that this isn't actually the Grim Reaper. They're just another lost soul who came here like everyone else. Death stayed here willingly because it was better than going back to the real world. They aren't interested in having a social life. At most, they just want to chill and play games with someone, and they even ask Ash to stay for that exact reason. Ash ultimately agrees because, like Death, she thinks it's better than what was waiting for her back in the real world. They decide to go up to Ash's room, but when they enter the elevator, they see another pile of ashes. Celadon hadn't been able to figure the elevator out, and after years of going through Death's trials, this ultimately ended up breaking him, and his soul withered away. Ash starts panicking, believing it must be the ghost of Mauve, but that's when Death gives up the ghost that they are Mauve.
Oh my god, I can't believe it!
Mauve never got to revive, specifically because they were so mistreated by everyone that there was nobody in the real world they wanted to connect with. They were stuck in a personal limbo. Over time, souls in the afterlife started to become disillusioned and hurt each other, including Mauve. So they hid the rules from new souls and manufactured the idea of the Grim Reaper so souls would more quickly get out of the afterlife and leave them alone. Mauve's story speaks to a level of nuance I've never seen in a story about a victim of this kind of severe abuse, namely the baring their fangs at people so others will go away. There's a common myth that victims of abuse frequently turn around and become abusers themselves, a myth that's fueled by self-absorbed assholes who think being snapped at is the same as abuse. In reality, abuse victims, especially those whose abuse was systemic in nature, often take on a repellent personality for the express purpose of repelling people. They don't trust people and so want people to go away. The motto of victims of severe abuse is "leave me alone." That's pretty much been Mauve's MO the last few years, getting people out of the afterlife so that they can go back to being alone, until Ash came around. Ash wasn't like the others. Ash was nice. But more importantly, Ash was a loner like them. Ash was someone they could play games with, someone who shunned the other souls like they did. There's that point in the recovery of any abuse victim where they start wanting others around them. They start desiring actual companionship once they realize someone out there could actually like them and treat them well. And Ash was that for Mauve. Trying to ignore Celadon, they return to Ash's room. Mauve explains that even with how alone they are, they can never really revive. They may be an adult now, but they're still black and trans in the United States, a country that's speeding into theocratic fascism like Anakin diving in a speeder. I like how the two of them have a very brief conversation about gender as well. At one point, Ash remarks to Scarlet that she never really felt feminine and prefers Ash over Ashleigh, but balks slightly when Mauve offers to start calling her they, and remarks that it'd cause trouble for her doctors. That crack's not going back in your eggshell, Ash. Ash then definitively decides to stay in the afterlife with Mauve. Gay, and the two of them start playing Reaper's Pickup again. Unfortunately, Ash's IV runs out and she starts feeling dizzy. Looking down at her hands, they're starting to crumble to dust. Ash's time has run out. Mauve immediately starts panicking, picks Ash up, and sprints to the elevator, telling her that just hit the button to revive, a button that Mauve can actually see now. Unfortunately, Ash's hands have completely withered away. So Mauve hits the button. Mauve made the decision to revive with Ash in order to save her life. They're scared, they don't know how to live in the real world, but they took that risk so Ash would live. Ash tells Mauve where to visit her, and Mauve promises that they will. Out of all the endings, reviving with Mauve is probably my favorite. Mauve's character has echoes of syrup in them, my favorite of Nami's characters, a bitter antisocial loner who eschews social connections while at the same time craving real companionship. Ash didn't have to do anything more complicated than just spend time with them to completely change their outlook on life itself. People often go to great lengths to try to fix survivors of severe trauma, but all you need to do is be kind and patient and let them come to you. Ash doesn't do anything particularly special, she's just there and just thinks Mauve is interesting, but that's all she has to do. All the characters come to hold Ash very dear to their hearts, but Mauve is the only one who gives something up to save Ash's life. That's how much they love her. Mauve may not be a good person, the way they treat the other souls makes that abundantly clear, but they didn't have as much of a say in what kind of person they ended up becoming as they'd have liked. I find this approach to a character fascinating, and it tends to be the reason I stick with other games, and even other visual novels, longer than I perhaps ought to, but Mauve is the first one I've seen actually done the justice it deserves. There are alternate routes that let Ash leave alone, where she wonders if the hospital will let her call her parents, or if they'll let her out to go to the park and maybe play chess with an old man. Ash doesn't leave with anyone in particular in mind, just that she doesn't want to be alone anymore. The entire game is about isolation and metaphorical death. In a dev diary, Nami says that those themes were heavy on her mind when she wrote up the idea for it in 2022, which actually makes a lot of sense. Suffice to say, the game comes away with the theme that a social death is only permanent if you let it be that way. Ash seems to have resigned herself to being alone on the basis that, what can I do in the hospital? If you've never been hospitalized, there are places where Ash could socialize with other patients if she wanted to. Long-term patients have all kinds of events to go to because doctors are aware that morale is an important thing for recovering. Even as a teenager, when I was on a psychiatric ward, they still let me out to take walks unsupervised, and we were often encouraged to befriend the other patients. Ash just didn't bother because she felt her life was over. Mauve carries the same baggage, choosing to reside in the afterlife because they feel there's nothing for them in the real world. Of course, there is, if you're willing to try. For Ash, after leaving the afterlife, the decision is easy. Does she want to be happy for the rest of her life or miserable? This is one of those games like Astra's Garden, Charm Studies, or Syrup 2 that's really going to make you sit back and rethink part of your life. In the previous video, when discussing Astra's Garden, even just discussing its themes had a lot of commenters saying that it gave them some measure of peace regarding a chronically ill loved one who chose palliative care instead of fighting to survive. And they hadn't even played it yet, they just heard me talking about it. I'm positive Return to Ash will have the same effect. And it's on Steam right now for $6! Holy shit, you could bump that up to 10 at least, wow. Anyway, Return to Ash is fucking phenomenal.
There are no rules, no restrictions, and no strife. Take my advice, just kick back, relax, and enjoy your afterlife. Do whatever you want, but enjoy your afterlife.
Okay, so since I gave this game a star, which is the highest rating on my grading curve, the question arises of where I'd place it on the ranking from the last video, as I also gave Syrup 2 and Astra's Garden stars, and they took number 1 and number 2 respectively. I'd actually slide Return to Ash in at number 3. All three games are very close to each other in quality, but I feel the other two just barely edge it out. Anyway, I'm CD Call, and thanks for watching.